Hi, it's me Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe my channel and visit my Patreon page, link in the description.
The six of us walked towards the kitchen while Uncle Bob turned and walked towards the living room. Over the next 10 minutes, we mashed the potatoes, made the gravy for the roast, and put the vegetables into serving bowls. As soon as we had set the table and carried everything to the dining room, Aunt Sharon called Uncle Bob to the table. The awkward silence continued after we said grace and as we quietly enjoyed dinner. Uncle Bob kept stealing glances in my direction, but I never looked at him directly. "This is ridiculous," Aunt Sharon finally said. "I thought we had this all settled," she said to Uncle Bob. "It's settled," he said. "Valerie and Michelle are welcome to share our house while they locate a place of their own." "Ashley," Lisbeth said, correcting her father. "Her name is Ashley Michelle James." "It's changed again?" "No," Suzanne said. "Ashley was using her middle name back home because it was confusing until they had their names legally changed. She's using Ashley now because that's the name that everyone in this part of the state knows her by." Everyone who watched the local television news this past summer. If you had been here, you would have seen her every night at 6 and 10. If I had been here, I would have put a stop to this masquerade before it got so far out of hand. If you had been alive 400 years ago, you probably would have led the townspeople in Salem while they were hunting witches, Lisbeth said angrily. Uncle Bob gave her a confused look. "What is that supposed to mean?" "She's saying that you're acting like we're living in another century," Aunt Sharon said, "and she's right. This is the 21st century. I know the date." "Then you should also know that what Ashley is doing is correcting a genetic mistake from birth," Suzanne said. "What mistake?" "He was born a boy and wants to pretend that he's a girl now. I spent the summer in San Francisco. I know what's going on." "Take a good look at Ashley," Aunt Sharon said, "and tell me what you see with your own eyes." He looked at me directly. "I see my nephew, dressed in a skirt," he said. "You haven't seen your nephew in 5 years. There's nothing about Ashley that could possibly remind you of that 11-year-old except the same facial structure that she shares with her mother. You're only seeing what you want to see." "What makes someone a woman, in your mind, Daddy?" Suzanne asked. Having real breasts and a vagina." Ashley has real breasts, and her genitals will be restructured into a vagina when she has SRS. But Ashley doesn't have a uterus and is therefore unable to bear children. Neither can any woman who has had a hysterectomy, and there are millions of such women in the US. "Look, I may not know how to define one, Suzanne, but I know a real woman when I see one." "Then I have to repeat what Mama said. Take a good look at Ashley and tell us what you see with your own eyes." I saw a lot of female impersonators in San Francisco. A large bust, special clothing, makeup, and long hair doesn't make a man into a woman. "Daddy," Lisbeth said, "have you noticed that Ashley's voice is more than a full octave higher than a male's, and her features are soft and feminine?" Uncle Bob paused for a couple of seconds as he looked at me. "Ashley's voice will deepen in time," he said. "And all young people have soft skin." "A boy's voice deepens when he enters puberty, Daddy," Suzanne said. "Ashley is well past puberty age now, even for a late bloomer. She'll be 17 in a few months, and her voice won't be changing now unless she suffers an injury to her larynx. Look at Ashley's upper arms and shoulders. Do you see any evidence of the musculature that boys develop? And finally, look closely at her face. She's never had a single hair appear on her chin." These 3 things all occur when the body of a young adolescent male begins to produce increased quantities of testosterone. Ashley's body hasn't produced the hormones necessary for her to develop as a man, and the estrogen she's producing has kept her balanced in between the sexes. That still doesn't make her a woman. "No, it doesn't," Suzanne said. "And without a little modern medical help, Ashley might forever be stuck halfway between being a male and being a female. Her only toehold in the male world was her undeveloped genitalia." You're probably unaware that during the past 30 years, a great deal of research has been done to determine the differences between male and female brains. In recent years, they've researched the brains of deceased transsexuals, and they've discovered that the brains were inconsistent with the originally defined gender. The SRS surgery is only correcting a mistake made by nature when it combined the body of one gender with the brain of the other. Ashley, by being stuck right in the middle, could choose her gender, something that's seldom available to most people, and she's chosen to have her body agree with her brain. Pausing for a breath, Suzanne continued with, "If you look at the old movies and pictures of us when we played together as children, the only differences that you'll notice are that Nicole, Lisbeth, and I sometimes wore dresses, while Ashley wore pants. When we were all dressed in shorts, there's almost nothing that indicates the different genders that we had been labeled with. What you have to do, Daddy, is forget those early labels and really see Ashley for who she is now, even if it disagrees with the impression that you developed many years ago." While Suzanne came up for air, Uncle Bob stared at me. "Okay, I'll admit that Ashley certainly looks more like a girl than most of the crossdressers and many of the female impersonators that I've seen in San Francisco." "That's because she's not impersonating a female, Daddy," Lisbeth said. "She is a female." As Suzanne said, she just needs a little more help from the medical community to solidly define her gender for the first time in her life. The clenched jaw look that Uncle Bob had maintained since he first saw me seemed to have softened a little, but I wasn't expecting a miracle. It would take time for him to come around, if he ever would. The onslaught by his own immediate family, as they rushed to my defense, seemed to have had a profound effect. For now it was a great relief that he wasn't glaring at me. After dinner, I helped Aunt Sharon and Mom clean up the dining room and kitchen. Suzanne and Lisbeth had gone to get ready for their dates, and while the dishwasher took care of the dishes, I walked downstairs to watch television. Mom and Aunt Sharon went into the upstairs living room to continue their visit and talk with Uncle Bob. Larry was sent downstairs by Aunt Sharon when he arrived, and we talked until Suzanne and Lisbeth came down. "Welcome back, Ashley," Larry had said after we had hugged lightly. "Thanks, Larry. How's college?" "Different. I thought it would be kind of like high school, but it's totally different. Being away from home, my folks, and being on my own for the first time is so cool." "Have you heard from George?" I asked. "Not in weeks. I know that he was having trouble with his computer, so maybe it finally conked out. He should be home by Wednesday at the latest." "Lisbeth told me you're returning to the television studio." "Yes, that was the reason for moving here. I still have a year and a half of high school, though." "Hi, folks," we heard from the stairs, and I turned in time to see Kent reach the bottom and walk towards us. Coming down behind him was Lisbeth, and we sat and talked until Suzanne came down. After another few minutes of discussion, both couples left me alone in the basement rec room. Lisbeth and Larry had invited me to come out with them, but I begged off with the excuse of being tired from the long trip. After returning from the hospital the following afternoon, I called the station and spoke with Mr. Graham, informing him I was in town. He welcomed me and then invited me to the station's Christmas party on Thursday. He also told me that Mrs. Livingston, the woman who provides the wardrobes for the female broadcasters, had been advised that I would be returning as an anchor. He said that I should plan on visiting her boutique once the Christmas rush was over to pick up a wardrobe. After a late lunch, I went Christmas shopping with Mom and Aunt Sharon. Lisbeth had left early in the morning with Nicole because they had an office Christmas party to cater. The mall was packed and the shelves were emptying quickly, but I managed to find most of the things that I was looking for. One more day of shopping would do it for me. I had already picked up Mom's gifts before we left home, and I only needed gifts for my cousins and aunt and uncle. I had sent Graham's gifts off to Florida a month ago.
Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.